Hey everyone, welcome to the second edition of the Beloved by Clients podcast, where I'm interviewing people that have crazy experiences dealing with complex and challenging clients to dive into a situation so we can selfishly learn from everyone else's mistakes. I'm happy to be talking to my new friend, Chris Johnston, and he was a partner at L2D, and he was just telling me a story about a challenging situation. Let's go. Thank you for coming on, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you're just telling me before about how when you just started at L2D, there was a nameless startup that had attached itself to the company, and you had to disentangle the situation. Let's dive in. What happened?
Okay. Well, I'll give it a tiny bit of work history because that'll sort of back it
Please.
up just a little bit. So I started in design, specifically interactive design, around '98, around that time. And I worked through lots of different companies, and over the years I got more and more interested in sort of the social science aspect of what we do. And I enjoyed working with clients. I enjoyed doing the design part. I enjoyed managing and integrating with development teams, but I wanted to head a little bit more towards social science. So my last position before I started at LTD, I was actually looking to leave design as an industry, and it's not out of it's not out of a reduction of appreciation for design. Is what it is. It's just I just had spent a lot of time in the career path, and I wanted to do something different. So I was headed towards pursuing a PhD in sociology, and I met these guys. There was a small firm, and they had some decent big name clients, some clients that were sort of internationally scoped. They were doing a lot of work for the federal government here in the United States. They were doing some neat stuff, and unfortunately, they kind of entered into some bad patterns. And they needed some help navigating the waters of kind of client relationships. And so they were looking for somebody that had experience. And I was coming off a creative director position that was successful. And I was just kind of on my own doing sort of freelance work, consulting while I was pursuing this other avenue. What's that?
No, I
Okay.
was edging you on. Let's go. Interesting.
Okay, cool. And so they were looking. This is about 2011. About 2011, they were looking for somebody to help them kind of navigate these waters. And so I came on for it was initially going to be sort of a temporary stint. It was like I was gonna sort of bridge a gap, help them kind of get to the next level, and then we would work through some of these issues, and then they would hire somebody else in, and then I would kind of exit stage right. And one of these relationships that they were having a lot of difficulty with was with a startup. And this startup was it was really actually, I mean, pretty fantastic idea as far as startups go. But I'm sure as you can attest, Morgan, really the idea is not really the value of the startup. Anybody, there are a million different ideas that come out all the time, and we get pitched ideas constantly that are good, that are reasonable ideas, and I can see how they can turn into something fruitful. But it's the execution of the idea and turning it into something that's actually functional that is really the difficult work, right? Whether or not you're talking about establishing hardware, building software, doing UX, engaging with the user, making sure that all of those sort of patterns work together in sequence and work well is the hard work. And so the gentleman that was kind of the founder of this startup had an idea, and he was a really charismatic figure, really charismatic, imposing figure in a lot of ways, even physically imposing. It was a specifically strong personality. And he got connected with my two current partners, who are brothers. They're very nice guys. Genuinely want what's best for the client, and unfortunately, they began a relationship that ended up becoming really parasitic. The gentleman who was the founder ended up moving into their office on certain days and bringing his small staff, who were predominantly made up of family members or friends into our small office. This is right when I was starting, and I come in on a Friday, and there's like 4 extra people sitting at desks in our office, and I go to my now partners, and I say, well, what's going on here? And they're like, oh, this is so and so, and these are the people that work for him, and they come and work in our office. So I was like, so what's the relationship? And they kind of started explaining the relationship, and they're like, well, this is a thing that's got we've been doing work for him for months, and we've been planning this stuff, and we've been doing this UX, and we've been doing these comps and turning it into code, and it's eventually going to turn into this project. And he's promised us some stake in equity. Now, I'm sure Morgan, you've probably been down this road before too. The grandiose,
fortunately, yes.
Yeah, the grandiose startup idea, and we're all going to be billionaires, and you work to try to help out, and unfortunately, a thing that happens a lot in our industry is that you end up with there are really strong-willed, charismatic characters that love to get involved with small development groups, small design groups that are really talented, probably need to be charging more money for their services, and they do a great job selling them the bill of goods and saying, hey, we're going to ride this all the way to the top. You just have to trust me. And unfortunately, they kind of bought into that.
So this is interesting. I unfortunately know the archetype. It is far too common. I want to try to recreate it from the eyes of this gentleman. So
Okay.
So far you've said, give me one example of something he did is like that, which is a little bit annoying. Okay, he moved into the office a few days a week, but like that alone is like whatever. Because if everything else is going great, then that isn't a problem. So
Yeah,
so
that's right.
so let's talk about other examples of bad behavior, and then after that we'll talk about how the partners, everyone responded and dealt with it.
Well, I mean, one thing that was a red flag for me was that there was never any. There's never even any conversation about hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay you back for this office space, or my people are going to they're going to default to where you need to put them, etc. Like that. This is our office space specifically. We were paying for the rent, and this is just a red flag. I'm like, well, these people are coming in. They're setting up stuff everywhere. They're taking desks that other people have. And I was like, this is my first week. And I'm like, what in the world is going on with this relationship?
I didn't realize it was your first week. That's pretty
my first
funny.
week. Yeah. And throughout the week, I've been dealing with this project's a little bit late. This project's a little bit late because I knew that coming into working with these guys, they grew really quickly at first. They were small group and grew really quickly, got a few large clients and really grew out of their skill set of being able to manage these folks. And so I ended up basically in the first 3 or 4 days going on major damage control with a lot of projects that existed, and they were fine. The clients were okay. They just need to be communicated with. But then Friday rolls around, and this additional staff shows up, and they just start sitting at places, and they're spreading out their stuff everywhere. I'm like, what is this? And they're like, oh yeah, that's this. This is a project. They take this time. We shut everything down in our pipeline and just work on their thing on Fridays, right? And I'm like, okay, well, we have other things we've committed to. Can we get that done? Well, this gentleman had opinions about that. So not only was he coming into the office, he also had opinions on like how we were running our own internal processes, right? Which he really shouldn't have, as when it comes to sort of that, at least from my perspective, when it comes to a sort of client and pipeline, like how do we service the client sort of perspective, there needs to be a division between like what the client can expect and what we can deliver. And we need to be able to say, we need to be honest and transparent and say we can deliver on this day, but we need to balance that against all the other Gantt charts for every other project and say like this one's being worked on and this one's being worked on. And we can't move this other one off just because you have an emergency. So this gentleman had almost sort of carte blanche on specific days to say, you're not working on that, and would go to developers or go to designers and say, don't work on that, work on this. And I was like, whoa, this is a really big boundary violation. And so anyway, time goes by. I try to kind of.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
In retrospect, because it's been a few years.
Yeah.
From the eyes of this gentleman, do you think it was purposeful bad behavior, or do you think he was just naive?
It's probably a mixture of both, honestly.
A mixture of both.
Yeah, I mean, I try to take an optimist view when it comes to sort of understanding where people are coming from. I have to, especially in this situation. I'm coming in as an employee that is a management employee, but I'm going to be, it's a gap situation, right? And I go, okay, well, this is a relationship they've developed. They feel like there's equity in this. I need to support this as well as I can and hopefully get it on the right track. Well, time goes by. So anyway, to answer your question, I think it was probably a mixture of both. I think they needed to be better about educating, but I also think that there was a lot of machismo that was happening too. It was a lot of like chest thumping and move your stuff out of the way, and this is what we're going to work on. And my partners were, like I said, such nice guys, but in a lot of ways very passive about these things. They said, okay, well, we'll address those now, and so anyway, time goes by. We work for several months, and this gentleman enters into and I'm not going to mention which one it is because they're fairly well known, but one of these big startup incubator contests, and gets in. It's a good enough idea that gets in, and he says, hey, there's this major North American city. He's like, I'm going to be going up here. We're doing the startup incubator. We're going to be working with these mentors, and they're going to take us through this thing, and then we're going to do this pitch in New York City. That's plain vanilla enough that nobody's going to be able to figure out what it is. And we're going to try to raise funding for this thing. Now, there was still never any promise of being paid back for anything. It was just sort of like, it was very pie in the sky.
Question: You had mentioned a little while ago that you were promised equity. Were any of those, was the equity promise in writing or in specifics, or was it more, trust me, one day I'll give you something when you have something?
Yeah.
The latter.
It was the latter. Yeah, it was the latter. It wasn't a
but I want to observe that's another red flag.
Yeah.
Where we're giving people promises but not writing them down is a sign of lack of seriousness of the promise.
I think that there was maybe an original statement of work. I think that there was some sort of eventually we would be given this for doing this sort of thing, but at that point the statements of work were so loose, and there really wasn't sort of an ironclad MSA to kind of keep this person accountable. And I think that those things are good. I don't, I think there are people that probably take offense to that and say I should be able to work with somebody because they're my friend or because I'm connected to them in some ways. But in some respects, having those just really evens the playing field for everybody and says, okay, here's my obligation, here's your obligation. We both sign on the dotted line, and we can move forward together happily because we know we both have to meet an obligation. And they didn't. There was none of that. It was just sort of a general expectation of you get this thing done, which is extremely nebulous, right? And when I'm happy with it, then maybe there's going to be some compensation in the end. And
by the way, as a minor tangent on that, because I find that interesting, it feels like often in the world they're like the two extremes. You're like a bunch of 23-year-olds. Yeah, we're friends. We trust each other. Let's do this. Or I'm a nice guy. Yeah, I'll help you. Just pay me. Yeah, pay me $5,000. I'll do this. It's fine. And then at the other extreme, it's like lawyers with like these 100-page contracts that are scary.
Yeah.
And but what's interesting about your case is it actually turns out in the agency world, there's this huge space in between those two extremes where it's like where you need more sophistication and clarity than the young kid, but like but you don't need or you don't have the money for the gazillion-dollar a minute lawyers and their 100-page contracts for a stupid little website. So so a lot of this ambiguity happens in this middle ground.
Yeah, I mean, on that sort of spectrum, I feel like it kind of goes from really the idea becomes there's a lot of lawyers involved. Typically, the idea is so washed down, or the idea is so bastardized in some ways. There's so many cooks in that kitchen that maybe you have investors, you maybe have angel, maybe you have companies that have come in for Series A or B or whatever, and then and they all want their say. And so you've had like the exponential growth of like legal documents, right? And that project is almost a non-starter, right? And then on the other end, which is where we were, you have cult leader-esque figure, right? Who comes in that says, "Trust me, I've got the way of the future, and you just build my vision, and we're going to be dancing off into the sunset." And that's just not that. Neither one of those are starters for me. Like, we've actually done successful startup work. We've done work with startups that has turned into things that have been legitimate, but a lot of times that is a group that has proven themselves as I don't know, either a company or an institution. They've already done projects that are successful, and they have some capital, and they go, we want to use this capital that we have, our own, put our skin in the game, use this capital to build an MVP, and we're going to build this thing, and then we're together we're going to put together a pitch that's going to raise the money that we need to continue to build this thing out. But if the skin in the game is either I'm a cult leader, I'm going to lead you to the promised land, or on the other end of the spectrum, our skin in the game is tons and tons of money, but it comes at the end of a really scary tether. I feel like those are definitely polar opposite ends of that spectrum, and neither one of those are starters for us. Yeah. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but
100%. I think a younger version of me was at the informal end and wanted to be at the extreme opposite end, but the current version of me wants neither of those and is happy in this in the middle ground. In fact, a lot of the Beloved by Clients style book, this podcast, is all about helping people in the same middle ground figure out how to manage this sort of middle ground.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Now I want to hear what happens in the incubator. They went to New York City.
Well, they go to there's another major northeastern city. You and I are very familiar with the city, but I'm not going to go into details. And they spend time on the campus of an Ivy League university with these mentors doing this, right? And this gentleman gets to this city and he goes, "Hey, I'm kind of out of my depth here. I want you guys to come and join me," right?
No.
And so my two partners,
I didn't expect that twist. This is exciting.
Yeah, my two partners leave like for months to go to this other location, and they're like, "Here are the keys. We're all going this direction. We'll speak to you," right? And I legitimately think it's because they felt like, okay, we got into this startup incubator. Maybe things are moving forward. There's going to be something will happen eventually. This will be good for us, be good for him. And they're, like I said, such nice guys. They wanted to see it through, and so they were like, "Well, we need to help him out." He rents a house with some of the money that he's already raised. He rents a house. They move in with him. It's a really bad situation, right? They move their families and the whole thing, and like they're living in this place for several months, going through this incubator with him, cranking out work, trying to do work for us. I'm communicating with them remotely and saying, and like I said, this is 2011, 2012. So obviously things are a little bit different. It's not so easy to just Zoom call all day. And he's like really getting more and more irritated because I'm demanding time from them because they're my business. Well, they're not my business partners at this point, but they're the two partners that run the company. And like, I'm having to kind of handle everything at home, handling our team, managing the studio as an employee that's maybe there 9 months. And
by the way, from your eyes, it might like, even the frustration aside, it's like, wait, I just took this job and then the partners leave. Like, what's happening here?
Yeah. It was great because it showed that they had a lot of trust in me, and our relationship, personal relationship, professional relationship has continued to flourish. really out of transparency and just mutual respect. But I think that they were just thinking, well, we're gonna do the best we can for this guy, and yeah, and I don't know. Hopefully, we're running on goodwill, and we're going to be able to come out in the end on this. So they go and do this. They go to New York. They do this giant pitch. They come back here where we are, and where our studio is, and money is not rolling in, right? There isn't this. We haven't had all this like Series A funding, these different things that we were expecting. These $1 million checks weren't coming in. There was some money that was coming in, but it was really from kind of either local foundations or different things that were kind of involved in startup acceleration. And so we come back to our office. We kind of need to move out of the current office that we're in. We're outgrowing it. And he says, well, I just got this office space down in this sort of business development area, right? This sort of new and upcoming. I think that sometimes they call them like acceleration zones. There's a company that gave him a grant to kind of get an office, and he's like, I have to have this office space. I'd like for you guys to move into the office with me. And I'm like, oh, no.
For the company to get rid of its office and the whole company to move in. Yeah,
I'm like biting my nails, and they've come back from this thing. We've finally kind of taken a breath. They're working on the projects again. There was we had some internal issues with the senior developer. There were some things that were going on, but we were able to kind of settle things out. And then all of a sudden, he's like, I want you guys to move into this office with us. And I gave my protests, but at the same time, like I said, I'm an employee. I'm not even like an employee that's dedicated the rest of my career to this. This is just sort of like an intermediate position. So I say, okay, well, whatever you guys feel like is best, we'll do. We end up moving to the gentleman's office. He's decorated everything according to his brand.
Right.
So now it's we're living in his space. We're using our furniture to a degree, but everything it looks like we're a part of his company. Like we've been absorbed into his company. He sort of takes this position within the office, a real kind of almost in sort of an imposing position. He splits everyone up into different offices, so there's no more sort of like really cross-pollination between departments. And he makes it so that like he talks to very specific people, and so all of a sudden we've moved from what we really love is sort of familial, egalitarian sort of environment where somebody who's working in production can go and talk to a manager. Obviously, there's still some boundaries there, but we love that idea that we can be able to have those interactions. And all of a sudden, it's now divided and really intensely hierarchical. And he's at the helm. And it all kind of came to a head because one of our employees ended up really getting close with him. There was a bit of like kind of this person became a confidant in some ways, and there was some real sort of this kind of strange interactions. And I came into the office one day. So this is how bad.
I'm getting so excited. What happens?
I came into the office one day, and he has hired the head of this company has hired a developer specifically for his work, right? We're still doing his stuff, but he's hired a developer to do some, like projects that he has. And he's taken my chair from my desk. And he's taken my chair from my desk and he's given it to him. And so I come into the office and I'm like, there's this brand new developer sitting in the back of the office, and he's got my chair and I don't have anywhere to sit. And I'm like, I don't know, where did my chair go? And he comes storming out of his office and he gets in my face and he says, that's my blankety blank chair. And he said, that is not yours. And I'm like, I was like, what? I don't know what I'm going to do. He's like, I don't know what you're going to do. And he starts flexing like he's going to punch me. And I'm like, wait a minute. And all of a sudden, the air is clearing for me, and I'm seeing this guy hates me. This guy hates me because I've been a bit of a thorn in the side.
Yeah.
Like, we need boundaries, we need this, we need that.
Right.
And my current partners run out and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And then everything subsides, you know, they have to jump in between us. And he's super mad. He goes running out the back, and there's, you know, and he's cursing, and there's this whole thing. And I leave for like the rest of the day. And it became that, I don't know, in some ways, like incestuous, like the environment, that it was like breeding these really weird interactions. And that just kind of took it to the nth degree. And then our employee, we found out that day, our employee left to go work for him. Like, he recruited one of our senior employees out from underneath us to go work for him. And it just ended up being really, really bad. So we were like, okay, let's get out of here. Let's do this. And it came to a head. I had to go back. I had to talk with him. I talked with him in the parking lot, and I was like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what I did. You know, let's just shake on it and just work through this. And he was like, you know, okay, you know, that's fine. I'll work through this. And I said, listen, you know, guys, I talked to my the current partners. I said, listen, we need to settle up with this guy and just move on. Like, things have to change. And we have to get out of this environment. This is just terrible. And they completely agree at this point. They're like, that was way over the line. This is not turning into anything that we need. And I say, okay, if we were to just break even, we were to take our break even money, you know, and give him a bill basically for the hours that we've put in for the last year, you know, let's do it. Right. And let's leave. Let's just get out of here. And so we can get this kind of invoice together. We say, this is how much money effectively we put in for this year at break even costs. Like, you know, I mean, you have this, we're profitable here. This is what we want to target, but this is just us keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
That's what we were. And it was.
Wait, just to be clear.
Yeah.
For the whole time until this point, or the previous year, there had been no invoice.
No invoice.
But since you started, they hadn't even been paid for anything.
Nope. Not at all.
When your story is over, we're going to discuss some lessons from this.
Okay.
But I'm so excited. So I like what.
They give him this.
By the way, there's no way he pays it. Like
no, he turns into a spectacle. He which is, you know, part and parcel with his personality. So he goes and he gets checks because he had money. This man was personally wealthy already, from family stuff, and then he also had money that was coming from other people that were granting him sort of startup money. Nothing to where we felt like we could grow, but yeah, there was some money. And so he goes and gets cashier's check of this, and he orders pizza for the whole office, and he gathers everyone around. Okay. And he puts the check down and he says, here's the check. And he goes, you guys can take it and we can end this relationship. And he says, this is the higher office. This is production. Right. This is every way from junior all the way up to ownership. And he goes, you can take the check and we can end this relationship, or you guys can follow me and we can turn this into something great. These are our employees.
Wow.
Right. And I wasn't a part of, you know, the actual company at this point, just an employee. So I didn't have any say in what actually happened, but the check was in some ways just a red herring. It wasn't actually going to turn into real money. I think he ended up kind of reneging on that promise. We ended up moving out, went into total, I mean, really, because we didn't have an office anywhere.
Wait, the check didn't turn to real money? So
No.
I'm a bit confused. He had a spectacle. He said, everyone, here's pizza, here's the check.
Yeah.
Do you want the pizza or do you want the check? What did your partner say in response?
Well,
give me some pizza.
Well, effectively, they were like, they were like, well, we need to talk about this. This is out of this. We don't need to have this conversation. So they went and talked about it privately. And then, really when it came out in the wash, they ended up just kind of saying, well, we're just going to walk away from the situation. We don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. And the check was coming with a certain expectation that you are going to be held to finishing the thing that you said you were going to finish on the original statement of work. So this real pie in the sky statement of work from several years before that I said was really loosey goosey and
Right.
there wasn't any sort of ironclad contract. We were going to be held accountable to that, or there was going to be legal repercussions. So you can take the check, and then you're forced to do the work, and then you guys can walk away. And it's like, wait a minute, what do you see success out of this? Does this need to be a functioning startup? Do we need to make all of your hopes and dreams come true? And then we're out from under your thumb. So as far as I know, that's kind of how the conversation went. And then we went, but all that I know is that as an employee at this point, we ended up moving out within like a week. We were just, it was damage control. Let's get out of here.
So moved out within a week, and also that money never came. So it's like, we're just going to lose money for the last year.
That's right. It was just sort of insult to injury, but I think that we knew that it was such a toxic environment that we just had to get out. And I'm really glad that they took that. And I mean, we were a solvent company. We've always been a company that believes in bootstrapping. We have savings. We've never lived on credit, things like that. So we had money and we were able to survive, but it was really lean, really, really lean. We actually we were such a small company at that point, I think maybe 10 people. We were able to move into one of the partners' like living rooms because we had no office. We had nothing. We're just like, we know we have to get out of here. And we went with trucks, moved everything out and just moved it in there and worked from like ping pong tables for like 4 days or something like that. We just did what we had to do. And then we ended up moving into another office pretty soon afterwards. But it was one of those times, and specifically for me, it was really visceral, right? Because I had this confrontation with this person, and in retrospect, I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know his mental state. I don't know if he was stressed out. I don't know if there's money woes. I don't know what was going on, but it was one of those things that like, it was like a car crash in slow motion. I knew it was coming. And in retrospect, they look back on it and go, oh, I can't believe that we did that. But it's been great because we've been able to learn. They were able to learn a lot about how we handle startups and how we handle engagement. And we've had similar pitches since then. We had a pitch from, and once again, I'm not going to mention anybody, but from a Russian gentleman who's local, who made lots and lots of money in Russian real estate during the Putin years, and he came here to the United States, and he was a very strong personality, and he would just show up out of the blue at our offices and just come in. He wanted at one point his daughter to work for us, and he was like almost pushing her on us. It was just one of these things, and there were all these red flags, and we're like, we just can't do it. And it was great because I really saw it as a hurdle that we had kind of collectively jumped over and gone, okay, these are going to be toxic relationships, and we can see them kind of a mile away.
So this story is amazing. I love the ending. Thanks. I love the confrontation over the chair movie version coming soon. Yeah. Now let's analyze that story, and I want to think in particular about basically about red flags to notice, like the specific things to notice, and also the related but slightly different question of things that knowing how to work with clients in a more mature way now, things that you think you or your now partners should have done differently in retrospect. So one general theme is the good fences make good neighbors, and documentation, like just and clarity more broadly. This is my role. This is your role there. So that's the overarching one. I think a more subtle lesson is make sure you get paid on a regular basis, no matter how much you really like them.
Yeah. I think that those are both really accurate. I think
and what's interesting, especially when like your friends, oh, of course they'll pay me. Like we all like each other, we're all together, and you don't really need the money. You're not thinking about it, and often dealing with money is icky. Who kind of wants to talk? Who wants to talk about it? Oh, just put it off. But we really have these deliverables that when basically what's interesting. One of the interesting characteristics of money is money forces clarity on situations. So like if someone's an asshole and they're not going to pay, better to find that out sooner after 3 months of work or 1 month of work rather than a year of work.
That's right. I mean, one thing that we've done and sort of institute is we always have a discovery phase together that we work through with the client from the very beginning. And we want to test, we do that so that we can not only learn more about what the project scope is, and so we can actually scope it fairly accurately, but that we have that interaction with the client and we can present something, we can present some strategy, and we can see what their response is to that. Another thing that we do is we do a lot of, and this might sound kind of creepy, but we do a lot of personal intel on clients. When clients are coming in, we have to, like I search legal databases and we check all of their social media accounts and we do those things. I mean, people are going to leave a trail of dead. If they're a toxic person, they're going to do that. And I think it's great because designers, developers, and people that work in e-commerce or people that are working in consulting and within our field, I think we love to have rose-colored glasses on because we want to think that we can change the world with some of what we're doing, and so we look at people and we go, okay, well, I'm going to take the best possible side of them, and I want to work on this because they have a good idea, and maybe it'll be something that will turn into something that's fantastic. But we also have to be realists about this. We have to protect ourselves a little bit. We have to say, like, this might not be great. And I think it would behoove us a lot to spend a little bit more time sort of studying the patterns of abusive relationships. I know that seems like a really bizarre parallel to kind of working in an agency, but these relationships take on or relationships with sort of toxic folks in this way take on very similar patterns. And knowing that kind of like, I love you, I hate you type of like the wax and wane in abusive relationships, and like broad scale sort of manipulation. I mean, the Czech pizza thing, that was in some ways kind of a master stroke of manipulation, right? You're talking to a whole staff of people who don't have any understanding of the sort of the fiscal relationship. That's right. Or what's going on behind the scenes. And you basically say, you can take this and be base and walk away with this, sort of payoff money, right? And then go do this other thing. Or I can appeal to your higher nature and we can collectively change the world, it's so tough because there's an immediate sea change towards seeing this person in a positive light if you don't have any context for understanding what's actually going on behind the scenes, and that's that style of relationship, that's that style of engagement, and that's something we've really learned to be super sensitive to. Is like, how are they speaking? If a person comes in and they have this great idea or whatever, how are they treating us? How are they treating our employees? If they have a conversation and we bring a dev in, or we bring a designer in who's maybe senior level, junior level, are they speaking to that person? Are they treating that person like a human being? Or are they using manipulative tactics against them? I know this sounds really bizarre, but sort of understanding sort of the subtleties of human interaction, I think has been a huge benefit to us really weeding out bad actors.
So, by the way, I agree 1,000%, and I really like general framing. I think it would be useful for anyone watching this, hi all two of you, it would be to just articulate some of these specific details or risk factors to notice. So one that you're implying from the pizza situation is making private conversations public, and like just doing that, like doing that or under any circumstance is a red flag. Exceptions if everyone agrees and if we discuss it, hey, let's go. But immediately, like unilaterally taking something private and sensitive and showing it to the group, that's a very good red flag.
It is exactly.
I also think my instinct is something that's different but related but slightly different is the penchant for spectacle. I don't think I've ever said the word penchant, however it's pronounced, the penchant for you see it written, I don't say it much. The penchant for a spectacle is another risk factor as well. Because if someone's putting on a spectacle, that by definition means what the spectacle is they're adding layers on top of the reality. And you always need to understand reality. So even if it's a fun and a good, like this happens to be a bad spectacle, but if it's a fun show, like there's still the layers you need to then unwind in order to figure out what's happening. So maybe be warned of the spectacle type.
Yeah, I agree. And I do want to make sure to draw a distinction between somebody who's toxic and somebody who's a strong leader. I think there's a trend in our industry to flatten out every hierarchy, to say there is no distinction between somebody who's junior, somebody who's just walking in the door, and somebody who's a partner, C-level, or a director. And I do think that it's good to kind of fraternize across those lines and have feedback. But at the same time, there can be strong leaders. There can be strong leaders who can say, hey, I have a voice and direction, and I feel like we should take this. I think that the key difference is is whether or not somebody can bring a group in with that and help everyone feel like they're contributing to that, and if that person is actually adding value there. If the person, if it's sort of just I'm running purely on charisma, I'm the ideas guy, I'm the whatever. It ends up with, I don't know. Did you watch the UK version of The Office?
No, I.
Okay,
never.
So Ricky Gervais's character David Brent, it's very similar. It's sort of it's like he's all talk, but it's really vacuous, right? And it's a great character, but you end up with this sort of like, it's just kind of I'm a force of nature, talking head personality, and I just want to make everyone fall in line with what I'm doing, but I'm not really bringing anything to the table. Versus somebody that goes, I'm a strong leader and I have an opinion and I want to take our team in a direction, and here's why. And that person goes back and kind of sells the idea to the people that are working on the project. But those people have feedback, have the ability to kind of have feedback there. Those are two very different personalities. So that's my only caveat, is I just want to make sure that I do draw a distinction between those two things, because great companies, yes, they're built on the people that are actually working in production, but they also have leadership that have an opinion and have a perspective and can really relate and encourage people that are working for them.
I like your distinction, because yes, I agree. It makes sense. I think if I were to argue against myself, I just made the argument where people were putting on a spectacle. If I were to take the other side of that point, I always like the etymology that the English word person comes from the Latin persona, which is the Latin word for mask. Mm-hmm. And I always think that's powerful. Like, who you are, your person, it's literally a mask that you wear. And like masks, like what you canonically use in spectacles, that is theater. So like the etymology itself ties in on the literal level as well. And what I mean to say is, in a way, everything is a mask, and everything is a spectacle. So you always need to be trying to see to see what is below the surface, no matter what.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you're working in leadership from the reverse side, understanding that you maybe have that mask, right, and being able to kind of reveal and be vulnerable in some ways about like what are the things that are driving me in this direction, and being able to kind of be open about who you are with your employees or with the people that are working within your group.
By the way,
Yeah.
I agreed. You made a minor point a few minutes ago. I just want to click back in the browser too, because I think I might disagree with it. So I want to talk through where you said in passing that it's good to fraternize the juniors with the directors and so on. So my personal take is I actually don't think that's good. Like, like lots of companies have team lunches and team groups, and I personally don't go to that. Partially, I kind of hate most people, and I just want to be alone. But ignoring that, when there's too much fraternization, you mentioned a little while ago talking about the bad client. He became really friendly with one of our employees, and we found out he hired him.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of fraternization that happens, and fraternization is in fact in a way kind of the opposite of good boundaries make good neighbors. So an interesting challenge is like, how do you fraternize just enough but not too much?
That's a good question. I think it really depends on the size of your company for sure. If and I also think it's it's also closely tied to how you're fraternizing. It's one thing I think for you to know your team, right? To know your team and the team that we're talking about from more of a management perspective now, but to know your team, to know what's going on in their lives, to be able to be sensitive to the fact that they have complexities as well, right? And it's another thing I think to go, you can rely on me for anything, bro. Like anything that we're super close buds and everything's the same, and let's just flatten this out. And if you have any problems, if you have a problem with my partner, you can come and just like blast them to me. Like you need to have those two spheres don't need to intersect at all, right? And I think in the same way that we have to draw these sort of contractual boundaries, there has to be these sort of unspoken boundaries where you say, I don't mind having a conversation with you. Let's grab a little lunch. Let's talk through some of the issues that you're facing. Let's do these things. But when it comes down to like, we're super close buds and we're going to have drinks and we're going to figure this stuff out together, and it's me and you against the world, and that blurs the lines of hierarchy. And that I agree with you in this way. It undoes what we need in a functional office day to day. Being able to kind of go, here's a directive. I need you to work on this. If I can't have that relationship with that person and there be that division, then I can't ask them to do things and actually really kind of demand that it gets done, and that undermines sort of the point of office hierarchy. So that's where I'd agree with you. So yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks for drawing that out. I think it needed a little bit more clarification.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. So now, before we wrap up, any other, I think we're clear on the higher level lesson of your awesome story of the importance of boundaries in all these different ways. I'm wondering if there are any other specific little lessons, like beware the spectacle. One that is obvious, but I just want to say it directly because we haven't said it directly. So in case it's not obvious for someone, is huge red flag to let a client move into your office or vice versa. And it's tempting to understand, especially when you're young and you're starting out. Oh wow, we can save $1,000 a month, or we don't need to use my living room. So it's tempting, but that's this massive boundary blur that leads to exactly the sorts of situations we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. And that ties into all of the sort of relational or physical manipulation sort of stuff that can sometimes happen. From a more of a kind of corporate perspective, I'd say a huge lesson is to continually work on your contracts. I mean, I end up doing it a lot. I talk with our attorney some. I end up doing a lot of the contract writing just because I kind of have a little bit of a gift for doing that, and I run that by sort of our attorneys. But our contract has continued to evolve every single year, and there are some people I think that are taken aback by the complexity of our contract. It's very. I feel, and we've done work with, international, and I don't know. I did work with an international petroleum corporation, really large, probably top 10 in the world petroleum corporation. We did this work for, and they were great to work with because their lawyers came back and they're like, "This makes sense. This contract makes sense." They had some edits, they had some corrections, but for the most part, it's equitable on both sides. We can work together on this. But one thing I've noticed is that if we throw a contract at somebody, and it's pretty good ironclad contract, even if it's equitable, if somebody balks at that, it's typically a red flag. If they balk at the documentation that you really need to establish, or your process, right? We do a discovery phase. We have to write a statement of work specifically for that. You pay for that before we ever give you a scope for something else. Like if you balk at that, and you balk at our process, and you balk at our contracts, and you say, "Oh, this is way too much. This isn't fair. Whatever," then there's a pretty good chance we're not going to work well together. And you're going to try to kind of manipulate the situation. We had this happen just this past summer with a client that was trying to kind of move in and work with us. There was a lot of demands. He wanted it done immediately, and he wanted everything explained, and it was we backed off of it really fast. And I think from the onset, the better the relationship. It was obviously we can't tell because that's my personal. The engagement didn't.
No, I agree 100%. I think sadly this is a lesson that comes with age and experience.
Yeah.
So our agreements perhaps means we're getting old.
Yeah.
Also with, sorry.
But we're very hip, though. That's the thing.
Old is defined as anyone more than 15 years above my current age. So, so therefore, I'm not old.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I like that definition.
Yeah, I thought of it the other day.
Yeah.
But so I like that. I think a real world challenge with implementing your awesome advice, other than when you're too young, you just aren't sophisticated to realize the importance of contracts, is I think, especially when you don't have enough money, you're not making enough money. It's like, oh, okay, they want to change this, they don't like it this way, but look at the zeros at the end of that check. And so even though it's a risk factor, they don't like the contract, the process. So you see the risk factor, you just really need, that money, and big checks are hard to resist. Note, I think the worst situation is when the red flags are going to be a bad client and there's no money, which is a reason why this startup situation is so compelling. We're a startup with no money and these crazy red flags. That's the worst. But the ones that are challenging in a different way is where there is money, but the same red flags.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, it's complicated for sure. But
it's complicated. Things we will discuss in future episodes of the Beloved by Clients podcast. Chris, this was so much fun. I often chat you that we should chat. We should video conference more just because it's fun. Maybe we should do this again without turning it into a podcast, just to hang out.
Yeah, I'd love it. Anytime.
So, okay, now I'm gonna press stop. Thank you everyone for coming.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.